Hello. There we go. Welcome to WooCommerce Live. Give me just a moment here. There we go. Perfect. Welcome to WooCommerce Live. I am Jonathan Wold, and I lead community initiatives here at WooCommerce. With me is my co-host, Noelle Steegs. She's a developer and a volunteer here in the WooCommerce community. Good to see you, Noelle.
Good to see you too, Jonathan.
So we got a lot to cover today. We're going to be talking about how to improve the checkout experience in your e-commerce store, and quite excited. We've had a lot of good questions coming in, and we're going to answer as many of those as we can on today's show. And at the end of the show, we will be doing live Q&A. We've got a special guest joining us for that, and we'll be answering more questions that you guys have. So think about what you'd like to ask, and you can begin to drop them either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll get to those after the main show. So let's go ahead and get started. Noelle, what are some of the wins that we have to celebrate in the community this past week?
I wanted to highlight two people that are both new, but they're already creating such meaningful conversation, either through posts or comments. The one is Ben Kextel. Ben, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And there's Al Eden. Thanks so much for contributing to the community, for taking the time to answer people's questions and, to formulate yours well when you have one. I've seen a lot of conversations around these two people. So that's awesome.
That's fantastic. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the Lima Peru meetup group, which has been quite active. And if you're looking for a group in Spanish, or if you speak English and you're curious to see what happens in Spanish, that's a fantastic group to check out. So we love the community. There's so much that's happening. The Facebook group is growing. We're coming up on 40,000 members here shortly. So if you're not part of the Facebook group, you want to check that out. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic. So improving checkout was one of the most popular topics that's been suggested. It's at the heart of having an e-commerce store, right? Like if folks express that interest, they want to make a purchase. We want to make sure that they have a good checkout experience. And that's what it's about. At the heart, when you think about checkout, what we find the most helpful, what we encourage you is to think about the overall experience that your customers are having. And we suggest that there are two key aspects of that to think about and questions to ask yourself. The first is to think about reducing friction. And the question that you ask is, how can I make it easier for my customers to buy from me? We'll talk more about that in a moment. The second is increasing value. How can I offer more value to my customers during the checkout process? So during today's show, we're going to focus on those two areas and answer the questions that you've sent in. And then we'll share some specific resources and recommendations along the way as we go, and then towards the end of the show as well. So Noelle, let's get started with that. How should we think about this idea of reducing friction?
Yeah, I know it's like a hot topic, and no surprise to me that it was chosen by our community. So there are many different ways to reduce friction, and I'll chat about like the most common ones, right? So one of the number one reasons for checkout abandonment, which means people leaving from the checkout page before they've actually completed the purchase, is hidden costs. Mostly shipping costs is mostly the bad one here. Sometimes tax, if it's not displayed with tax on the website. But shipping costs is the big one. People somehow just don't like paying for shipping. I advise to merchants, always offer a free shipping threshold if you can. If you can't, which is also understandable, then flat rates are great because you can display them very clearly on the website, and people know upfront, okay, I'm going to add $5 to my order for shipping or whatever. But if they get there and suddenly it's $20 and they had no idea, chances are that they can leave. So there's that. There's also the way of checking out. Depending on your setup, you might want to have people create accounts, but forcing them to create an account is not done. You should make it as easy as possible for them, as least steps as possible and not force them upon your customers. So I would say to always allow for guest checkout. Guest checkout shouldn't be the question. Whether or not you want to create accounts and manage those is yes or no, but guest should always be there. Then also, less is more. So think about the data that you really need to capture here, and don't capture the data that you don't need. For example, if you know that you always sell, to people directly, to customers, and not your business, you might choose to hide the company field. If you're selling virtual products, no need to capture a shipping address. I do see it time and time again. And I just want to share a quick resource for that as well, which is a post on the Woo blog about customizing checkout fields. And they guide you on doing this very easily with PHP. Now, not all of you guys have maybe, dabbled into PHP before, and that's okay. I see this as a really good first start because you have the code right here. And depending on what you want to hide, you just use those lines. So it's really like a copy, paste, and edit kind of thing. I would argue you don't need to know PHP to be able to use this. Test it on your staging site. Works really well for that first customization. Also, you don't want to have any distractions. So some people choose to completely hide their navigation and their footer, and they will just have, an easy way to contact, and they will have a logo so it's recognizable, but they'll really minimize all of that. You want to make sure that the page loads fast as well. It's so important. This is actually a resource that I wanted to show as well. It is a plugin that recently came out, so it's still new, but these guys, they have really looked at things really closely, looked at many case studies and improved so many points on checkout. When it comes to the less is more approach, they had a good look at that. I have seen many questions in the community about how to create this linear checkout, this kind of step-by-step checkout that's super user-friendly. And this plugin does just that. So check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. And then the last thing I want to raise is making sure that you send as many trust signals as you can. So you might want to show like a SSL or security badge. You will want to show an easy way to contact, whether you have your phone number right next to that checkout button, or whether it's a live chat that you have floating about. I've seen mini FAQs there, right there. If you want to know about, say, the returns or whatever the case may be, sometimes you can just click there. You have it in a little pop-up. Just make it really easy for people to check things last minute if they need to. And that will really help with the conversion.
That's fantastic. And I'm just going to pull it up real quick. I'm having some trouble with my screen sharing. But Sunday was a happiness engineer who works on WooCommerce, shared another resource. So if I recommend if you're feeling ambitious and want to learn, it's great to follow that tutorial and play with a little bit of code, which you can do quite simply. And if you don't want to do that and you want to use a plugin instead, then here is the checkout field editor plugin, which you can use to customize those fields without touching any code.
Yes, which works very well as well. And also when you want to maybe rename fields or move them about or add ones, then I would definitely say this is a really good one. I've used it as well.
Fantastic. So how about we jump to the first question? So Noelle, we had the first question from Dane, which was, this was submitted in advance. Do customers really want a one-page checkout, or is it better to split it into several pages? What do you think?
I would say it depends. My son is having fun on the side here. in many cases, the answer will be it depends. However, I would say in general, yes, one page having a really good overview of your next steps is mostly desirable. That's what I see a lot of case studies about. That's what I see a lot of people asking for. So, I would say if you don't have data to think that you do need a multi-page one, then go for the one-page kind of linear approach.
And to that, I would add, the thing that's important to keep in mind is that starting point of who's your audience and what problem are you solving for them. And it very much does depend. For some audiences, I think we'll touch on this a bit more later. If there is a more complex checkout process, or there's more things that they need to go through, especially like a B2B situation, et cetera, it makes sense to have additional steps. But for a lot of folks, especially if you're direct to consumer, like you want to reduce that friction as much as possible. And having a single page can be a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The next question we had was from Lawrence and Andreas. What possibilities are there to customize the checkout process? That's sort of at the heart of this. Like, what are some of the ways that we can go about it? And what do you think about that, Noelle?
Yeah, sure. There's so many things that you can do, right? There was questions about built-in. If you think about built-in options, when you think about the checkout process, don't just think about the fields, but also think about your options. So your payment and your shipping options, for example, is your audience well served with a same day or next day delivery option? Or, what is your audience maybe, more mature, and they might not be that technical, and they might still need the direct wire transfer option. Those kind of things are also things to think about when customizing checkout out of the box.
Awesome.
What I
would add to that is there are quite a few extensions available, and we'll share some more of those later that you can use. And also the theme that you choose to use can offer you built-in options for customizing checkout further. That is always a great place to start. So depending on what theme you're using, it's good to explore and see like what options they have sort of built out of the box. One of the things, and it's improving all the time in Woo as well, but Woo, if you're using WooCommerce sort of out of the box, it takes a pretty like default, like a non-opinionated approach to like what that experience looks like. And in most cases, you want to customize that to be a better fit for the audience that you're serving and the problem that you're solving for them.
So Jonathan, we got this question through from Nadur and Miroslav. They asked, how do we ensure that customers convert from wanting to add a product all the way to the purchase? How can they improve those conversion rates? So not just on the checkout itself, but the entire process. What do you think?
So I think it's well in line with this general theme of the experience, right? I think this starts with us asking this question, like, what do we have control over? For us as store owners, what are the things that we can actually work on in terms of the experience? And I find that it's helpful to start by asking, what's this experience going to be like from their perspective? A great example is if you know that a lot of your customers would be making a purchase on mobile, one of the best ways to improve the conversion rate is to just reduce as much friction as possible. Do not make them create an account on a mobile device. All right, like that's a showstopper more often than not, right? So if you start with this idea of like, all right, what audience am I serving? And then what can I do to look at it from their perspective? We'll talk a bit more about testing and getting feedback later. But I think that's the heart of it. If you want to increase the conversion rate, reducing friction is where most, I think, of the magic that you're going to find is. And the way to go about that is to ask yourself, with this particular audience in mind, what do I have control over? What can I do? And if, for instance, you know that it's going to be folks on mobile, what you tend to have the most control over is how simple you can make that checkout process, how fast you can make it, making sure that the page load is good. And then, at the heart of that is if you can reduce that friction, that's in most cases your best shot at increasing the conversion rate. Anything that you'd add?
No, I think that's really well said, and there is so much that can be done.
Awesome. Let's jump to the next question. Jacob wanted to know, is there an option for one-page checkout like Shopify on WooCommerce or a multi-step checkout? What are some of the options available? So I'm going to share my screen and let's see if we got this working the way that we want it to now. Yes, there we go. So there are quite a few available. Here is one of the extensions that you can use. WooCommerce one-page checkout lets you go in and get a one-page checkout. It has quite a few options for customization in it. And I think
so. It will show the products and the checkout together on one page, right?
Yes. And we showed the other one previously, and we'll drop links into the show notes afterwards for anyone who's missed
the linear checkout. Yeah, I would, if you're looking for that kind of style checkout, that could be a good starting point, depending on your exact needs.
Yep. Yeah. That's what I would suggest starting with. Play with those, and then you can search the marketplace for other checkout related extensions as well. What do we have next?
Right. So Kenny and Itai asked about validation, about how can they make sure that their customers type their email address correctly and their shipping address correctly. My first thought here is Google autocomplete. I've seen extensions around for that. Where people can start typing an address and, Google will spit out these options and you just click on the correct one and it fills it in. That really helps. And then what do you think about the email, Jonathan? What can people do there?
Yeah, so validation is great. Like, I think the first thing and a general principle to keep in mind here is focus your validation on serving the audience. Sometimes validation can be a real point of friction, where if you have something that's too aggressive, they might put in perfectly legitimate values, and it just doesn't work, and that's a major frustration point, right?
Like people with 2-letter names, right?
Yes.
Like they have this all the time everywhere. It's no.
I often see validation employed as a way of helping the store owner. And if you're thinking about this within the context of reducing friction, I think the general guidance is don't be too aggressive with validation. I would rather, in general, like if I'm advising a store owner, like working on my own store, I would rather deal with some of the problems on the back end and fix the data myself, rather than, because part of the issue is that you oftentimes don't know who's getting stuck in your checkout process. If they didn't properly validate, you often don't know about it, right? So in general, I would recommend being gracious and with your validation, and use as little as possible, and then bring it more in as you find persistent problem areas. Awesome. So we had a lot of questions that have come in. We know we already won't get to all the ones that are submitted. That's okay. Let's see if we wanted to grab one more from the reducing friction. Let's see here. So Mariano asked if you were selling event tickets, is one-page checkout or multi-step checkout easier? And I think we'll just sort of reiterate, this has been a recurring theme, like how do you pick? And it depends. And the guiding thought that we would offer is focus on what's best for your customer, right? For instance, if you were selling events that had multiple steps, that maybe it was more of like a business to business type of event, and there's different components, it makes sense to have a multi-step checkout. If it's something that is like for a new audience and they haven't been to one of the events before, in general, you want to favor something that's straightforward. So as you're looking at your options, whether you go with a one-page checkout or whether you go with multi-step, the highest level recommendation is to focus on the audience that you're serving, the problem that you're solving for them, and follow their lead in that. What makes it sort of most straightforward for them? Anything else to add on reducing friction before we jump over?
I just quickly wanted to touch on the topic of the coupon field. Obviously, coupons is an awesome functionality to have. It's very useful. But when people see a coupon field on your checkout, there's chances that they will leave your website and go hunt for a coupon. And that's not really what you want, right? So the advice here is to put it in a place, or or with styling and color. Just make sure that the hierarchy that is not like so eye-catching. What you can also do, what I actually did for a client of mine, because of how he handles coupons, I completely hid the coupon field at checkout. But his customers, they actually get their coupons via email with a link that they click on. And that still works beautifully. So people can only enter a coupon like that and get a coupon like that. So then there's no distraction at checkout for people who don't have coupons sent to them.
That's a fantastic tip. I don't know about you, but I've definitely been wired for that. I have to, if I see a coupon code field, it's like an automatic go and search for something. And I have to remind myself sometimes, like it's frustrating if you don't find it. I've seen people take advantage of that from a marketing perspective, and they'll try to like rank top. But in general, if you can find smoother ways to do that, that's better. Awesome. So let's talk about the increasing value side of things, and the heart of the idea here. So if you've looked for ways to reduce friction, the heart of the idea here is to look for more ways to increase value to your customer. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. One of the first things to think about is, how can you customize the checkout experience just overall to match the needs of your audience? We've touched on this a few times. And that starts by just like keeping things simple for them, making sure that they have the information that they need where they need it, especially if you get into more sort of custom types of experiences. Look for opportunities to really like fine tune it for what's most useful to them and what helps them get the job done that they're needing to get done. Examples of things to think about are preferred payment methods, right? Some of the audience that you're serving may have preferred ways to pay for things, and make sure that that's incorporated within sort of what you're doing. Next, another thing to be keeping in mind is look for opportunities to offer relevant products and services as add-ons during the checkout process. Great examples of this are faster shipping. Someone in some situations, they might want expedited shipping. Not all of your audiences do, but for those where it's relevant, that can be a great add-on to offer. Gift wrapping can be another example. And to the point that Noelle made earlier, like one of the things you want to avoid is surprises, right? So like having free shipping is a great example of something that you include that, but you could give them the option of expedited shipping, but don't think about how you present that to them as like an option, not something that you're forcing on them. Other examples of the types of things that you might include are the option to like spread payments out. And finally, one of the things to think about is just this general like upsell opportunity. Once someone's completed the purchase, that could be a great opportunity or ask them if they want to get something else that's related to it, give them a special offer. And there's some great extensions that you can look at for that. We're going to start wrapping up, and just wanted to give a couple of recommendations here. At a broad level. What was the first one that we wanted to talk about, Noelle?
Say again.
Well, on the recommendations front, we wanted to talk about testing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So testing is very important. Test yourself on desktop and on mobile. Always do it in an incognito tab, I would recommend. You can use heat mapping. Heat mapping tools are very useful to see how your user, uses your site. You can ask people in your network to test for you. Test, especially after big updates or adding some new functionality.
Awesome. The other thing we wanted to keep in mind is just getting feedback, right? Like ask your audience for feedback pre-purchase and post-purchase. Listen and look for ways to follow their leads. We have a couple of extension recommendations. Unfortunately, I'm unable to share them on the screen right now, but you'll see all these in the show notes afterwards. One of them is you can look at Automate Woo, which is a great way to play with emails, where you can send feedback emails, you can send abandoned cart emails. There are a lot of opportunities. That right there is a great category to look into as well. Another one that you might want to take a look at is one called launch flows, where you can play with this post-purchase upsell process and sort of what that looks like. And there are quite a few. Check out the WooCommerce marketplace, where you can browse the extensions and try things out there. I highly recommend that. Okay, so we've got lots more questions that we weren't able to get to, but we have plenty of time for Q&A. So let's go ahead and wrap up the main show. Thank you guys all for joining us. It's been fantastic having you. We really like shaping these episodes around what you're sharing. So it was awesome seeing all the questions come in. We've got the next couple of episodes lined up. Next week, we're going to get into the marketing topic, and we're going to talk about creating customers. Like, how do you get more? What are some of the best practices? What are some of the pitfalls and challenges there? We'd love to have you join us again next week, live, same time, same place. And you can look for the announcement email and details later this week. Also wanted to give a shout out to the WooCommerce product team has been looking for folks who want to be part of beta testing early versions of extensions and new product updates and integrations. So we'll drop a link to that as well. I highly recommend that you guys check that out. It's a great way to give early feedback and sort of see what's coming with Woo. And let me just see if I can share that. Looks like I'm going to just pull this up on the screen. I'm going to attempt to pull this up on the screen. There we go. And were there any other resources that we wanted to share, Noelle?
We could touch on the checkout blocks, customizing the checkout with WooCommerce blocks. Nice. Though I must say, because of the different frameworks that I use, I don't personally have much experience with that. How about you?
I'm going to pull that up onto the screen here. So this is Sunday's screen. He'll be joining us on camera in just a moment. And here is what that looks like with built into there's the WooCommerce blocks extension, which allows you to, in the new WordPress editor, you can play with different sort of variations there. So that's another good resource. We'll drop a link to that as well. All right, let me just switch that off. Perfect. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to the checkout, sort of improving the checkout process as a whole. But if you focus on reducing friction and looking for ways to add additional value, I think that's the heart of where you're going to see the most progress in being able to improve your conversion rates. So we've got a lot of resources. We'll include those in the show notes. And that is it for the main show. We're now going to transition over to our live Q&A. And for that, we've got Sunday, who is our special guest. He's joining us from the Woo Happiness team. Sunday, thanks for jumping in today and joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
Hey, Sunday.
Hi, Noah. Great to see you.
Awesome. So if you've got questions about improving the checkout or anything else Woo related, we're here. We'd love to answer your questions for anything that we weren't able to get to through the main show. So ask them away. Sunday, while we're waiting for questions, do you want to give any other context to what you were showing us? You were showing us the blocks, the block screen there.
Sure. Let me just quickly share my screen because several times people keep talking about customizing, the WooCommerce checkout, and most people actually don't know that that's possible with WooCommerce blocks. So I'd just like to quickly touch that.
And I'm just going to pull that up now. And one question I had about that Sunday that came up before is this in the WooCommerce core? Is it out of the box right now, or do you need a separate plugin to get access to this?
Okay, so basically you need the WooCommerce blocks plugin. It's a free plugin that's available on the WordPress repository. So this is it right here.
Yep, perfect.
So this is just all you need. So it's totally free. You just download it and install it on your site. Now, once you have it installed, you're going to notice that you have an additional option. So this is a new page. So you just create a new page and you had blocks the normal way you had, and then you're going to see that you have two extra blocks, and one is the checkout block and the other one is the cart block. And what this basically just do is help you customize the checkout page or the cart page. And
Yeah.
for instance, this is the checkout block now, and once you bring it in, you're going to see your checkout field. And on the sidebar here, once you're on the block settings, take note that we have the page settings, which allows you to apply changes to the page itself, and then the block settings, which allows you to customize the block. So you can toggle on some fields and you can toggle off some. So for instance, this is a company field. If I want people to input their company name, so I can make this a required field, or I could also make it optional. I could
Nice.
toggle it off,
That's great.
and then I can decide to say I don't want people having to put the apartment suite. Like for my region, this is not common. This is not actually used. So if you're building a store in my region, what you want to do is just toggle this off, which
Yep.
actually makes you to have less field. And you could decide to say if you want the phone number and if you want to make that a required field, and the option for customers to add notes and a couple of other options. And once you've done customizing these, you could decide to also set these as your checkout page. So you can link this to your cart page. So this will now be used for the cart experience.
One of the things I love about this is we're going this direction where, because when you install WooCommerce, you get these like default cart and checkout pages, which has been what we've been talking about. But with this concept of blocks, we're going to something where you can sort of put this anywhere that you want to. So, and this is a great example of something that I hadn't looked at it in a bit, and I remember this, and the range of options is continuing to improve. So that's a great example. Thanks, Sunday. All right, so let's
Pleasure.
jump over to our first questions. Anna, what kind of questions do we have so far? All right, Nicole is asking, how can I test the checkout without actually purchasing an item from my site? Noel, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. I would say always test checkout first on a staging site, so that which is a copy of your website. And for example, I know like Stripe and PayPal, they both have easy to use sandbox environments. So basically, you can see the data coming through and everything like it was a real transaction, but it's not. So it's a certain mode that you put it in. Sometimes when I work with clients, if we have to do some final testing on production, I make sure they refund me really quickly. I've seen people use discounts for that as well, although that's maybe a little bit less ideal from an admin perspective. Not sure. But yeah, I would say, Sandbox should be your go-to using the testing APIs.
Sunday, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, Sandbox basically just gives you the same experience like a regular checkout. So the way it works is you just put the Sandbox API and you check out using the regular flow a customer will use, and you get to use a test card. So you'll be given a test card which you just use, and you'll be debited just like a customer will be debited. The good thing about that is that there's also cards that you could use to fake a failed payment. So you see what happens if a customer's payment fail. What happens? Does the order go to on hold? Does it go to fail, or is it cancelled and all that? So using Sandbox is great. Another way to do it would be creating a coupon just to test it. So you could create a 100% discount coupon, and then you could use it on the checkout, which is also great.
Excellent. And there's some good resources on testing that will sort of go through the options. So we'll see if we can drop some of those in. Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of good documentation on that. So let's go to the next question. So Victoria wants to know, will Checkout Field Editor allow you to remove the coupon field? So we mentioned an extension earlier called the Checkout Field Editor. Sunday, do you know that? I think there's even a built-in way, no extension needed, to remove the coupon field. What do you think?
Yeah, if you're looking to hide the coupon field, one of the easiest ways to do that could be using custom CSS. But as far as I know, the checkout field editor basically just edits the checkout field. It doesn't touch the coupon field.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the checkout field editor would be focused on. Go ahead, Noel.
Sorry. If you want to disable coupons as a whole, there's a checkbox for that in the WooCommerce settings. But if you, like my one client that I mentioned, if you still want to use coupons but just not have the box there, then yeah, I would say CSS, and I'm sure that there's PHP snippets for that as well that one could use. But I don't know directly of like a plugin that would do that. But I would say most people want to hide that are not using coupons at all. So then it would just be within Woo.
Yep, just to turn it off there. And I just apologize for those watching live. I had we have a screen sharing capability set up, but for some reason my machine is having a really hard time with it. So we have a few screen shares that we can do, but mostly it's just going to be our beautiful faces. So Alex wants to know, are we able to ask for the coupon code after the order's been placed, like a pop-up? That's interesting. So I'm guessing that's a reference to like applying something after the fact, which I don't think I'd understand why you'd want to do that if someone's made the purchase.
I agree, because I would believe that from a user experience perspective, somebody would want to apply the coupon and see the total before they are clicking the payment button.
Yep.
I haven't seen this done before. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but there must be maybe a reason why it hasn't been done before.
Yeah. Now
maybe it would work well in a very specific situation.
I'm assuming that he's referencing I'm assuming that he's referencing after the order's been completed versus adding to cart, of course. And yes, I mean, one of the things that you could certainly do, you could offer a coupon for an additional product or a service, or like do other things like once they've made that purchase, which I think is something that is a good idea to think about. A lot of people don't think about that idea of like, okay, they've made a first purchase. If you're in a retail store, for instance, there's like, what are those things that are up on the counter? Like, what are those little things that, that folks will often add on, and thinking about how you can do something equivalent in your store. All right, Anna, what else we got? Oh, Victoria, follow-up question from Victoria. She wants to know if dummy credit cards can be used on a live site. So the answer to that is yes, but they won't work. I believe do you know offhand, Sunday? I believe the validation just sort of catches that. They wouldn't actually go through.
Well, but it depends on how you look at the question. Like the way I read the question is, maybe she's wondering if you have to do it on a staging site, if you can use a test mode on production, in which the answer would be yes. But you would want to make sure that, maybe you put your site in maintenance mode so that, actual customers, website visitors don't see the test mode now, because it looks different and they won't be able to check out. But you can do it on a production site, if that's the question.
Just to add to that, when we talk about testing the checkout process payments in staging, we don't actually mean that you have to create a staging site for that. This is actually a feature in the payment integration settings that you just turn on to basically set the payment to test mode. So with that, you use a test card provided by the payment gateway, Stripe, PayPal, and the rest, or WooCommerce payment, and they basically just test how the checkout flow works, how every order will be processed. So it doesn't actually mean you have to create a staging site. It's basically just turning on the settings on your live site just to set the payment to test mode.
And I think a general thing to keep in mind there, it's like I personally find the process, I'll just own it, of like setting up a staging site a bit cumbersome at times. It really does depend on, like, some hosts make it easier than others. It is less important when you're first starting, but it gets very important as you're going on, because if customers are making purchases, you don't want to be making changes, especially on an e-commerce site. It does matter more. So I'm just going to call that out.
Yeah.
Michelle had a next question. What's a good plugin that provides live shipping rates to your customers based on shipping destination, weights, and dimensions of products? So this depends on what shipping providers that you're going to use. And there are, in the WooCommerce marketplace, there are a number of extensions for the different popular providers. So that's where I would suggest looking first, and live rates is a great example of something that's excellent plugin territory. And I think pretty much all the popular carriers have a live rates extension available in the marketplace. So start with which carriers you want to use, and then sort of go from there. Noel or Sunday, anything to add to that?
Yes, and if you want to manually define the rate based on destination, weight, and dimension, an extension that will work for that will be the table rate shipping. So with this extension, you can actually allow people to check out based on the weight, charge people based on the weight, based on a few other conditions. But this doesn't give you the live rate using API. With this, you have to define the rates.
Yes, and so you can define the rates manually, but if you want the live rates, you need to go to extensions for that, and that can be, oh man, there's a lot you can get into there, but the extensions are quite straightforward to use, and importantly, have good documentation. So something I recommend taking advantage of. Anna, what else do we have? Mira wants to know where can we get the shirt that Jonathan's wearing. That is a great question. It's actually hard to get. We are working on getting new swag, and that's a work in progress. So appreciate the patience on that. It's been an ongoing project for a while now. I think the light's at the end of the tunnel, but we're not trying to keep it to ourselves. It's just been fairly difficult to get some of the details worked out. Your Marketing Rules wants to know, can you share any industry norms in terms of add to cart to purchase conversion rate? That's a good question. I don't have conversion rate data sort of on top of me. I think other than saying in general, it's a lot lower than you'd think, right? Like if Noel, anything?
Yeah. I did see some data on that before. It does differ per industry, but I can remember seeing and it wasn't from add to cart. It's the conversion of visitors. It was like a couple of percent, 1%, 2%. Again, it depends. I know that in Google Analytics, you can set an industry and you can benchmark against others in the industry. That's quite useful.
Drawing from my experience working with merchants and some of my own things, I think in general, like if you're seeing in a 2 to 5% conversion rate, you're usually pretty happy with that. You can see higher conversion rates, but those tend to be very specialized audiences, which is in general why we find it so important to focus on choosing an audience where that that the traffic that you're getting is focused on that particular audience, and then you can expect to see higher than average conversion rates when that you're getting in front of the right audience. But don't be surprised to beat yourself up if you're seeing low conversion rates. That it can be hard to know what to expect here. When I first got started, I was expecting 50%, 20%. It doesn't work like that. And the opportunity for you as the store owner is to unpack why are folks dropping off? What can I do to reduce that friction and do that even further? Last week we mentioned, I think it was Hotjar, which is a heat mapping tool. And there are different tools that you can use to look and see where folks are kind of dropping off in that process and understand ways that you might be able to improve that further. Anna, what else do we have? David wants to know what we think about one-click checkout. So that's a great question. David is someone who works on a one-click checkout plugin. It's called PeachPay. You can check that out. In general, I'm a big fan of it, right? I think the simpler that we can make the process for folks, the better. I think I've loved the advancements with things like Apple Pay and Google Pay, Android Pay, whatever they're calling it these days, where we're just making the process generally easier for folks. But there's still a lot of work to do, especially on the web. And it's been great to see a lot of innovation in that category.
Yeah, I think you need to have established a really solid trust bond, I don't know what to call it, with your customers. For example, one thing that works very well is I think, how Amazon does it. I mean, I get all my books there, so then it's like a no-brainer, then. But yeah, I think for
I was going to say, it can be scary how well that works sometimes. Like when that trust is established and you're in a pattern I'm like, wow, Amazon, you sure made that real easy for me to make that next purchase.
Yeah, almost
But
scary.
it's a good thing too. It's a good thing too. And we don't want, a lot of people are used to that. There's a conditioning to that as well. So when you're on your own store, you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of best practices and just making that process as simple as possible. All right, Anna, any other questions? Big Ship wants to know, I once wanted to build an Airbnb clone, and I heard WooCommerce is a plugin that has date picker checkouts. Can you explain whether such a plugin exists and if it can be used on a real estate site? Sunday, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I haven't seen one of those. I'm sure we don't have it on WooCommerce.com. If it's available, it will be a third-party plugin.
Noel, this is familiar to me. I'm not thinking of a particular plugin, but this feels like so there's a I'll take this as like a reservations plugin, and where I would encourage you to start is the bookings plugin, which integrates nicely with WooCommerce, where you could say have someone book a like that would be the starting point. And there are other ones like it as well as sort of add-ons for that, but that's the broad category that I'd encourage you to look into.
Yeah, I agree. And then that is like on product page level. So I would say, depending, but I would say in most cases, like bookings and things, you would want it on the product page and not necessarily a checkout. But maybe in some cases you would combine and have everything on one page, in which case, yes.
Yeah, and when you put it that way, it gives me a good idea. So there's the bookings extension, and then there's the accommodations booking. There is an add-on of that extension, so that will be what you need for this use case. I think
Nice.
I can share the link.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, if you've got the links, that's great. So if you get a moment, you can drop those into the comments, but we'll make sure that anything that we cover here gets into the show notes after the fact, which we'll send out. So awesome. Anna, do we have any other questions? So Max says that I've been using WooCommerce blocks plugin for checkout, but one problem, online payment methods can't work with WooCommerce blocks. I guess there might be some payment methods that aren't supported. Sunday, do you have anything that you say to that or any insight?
In most cases, issues like this are caused by conflict, and it could also be that the payment extension he or she's using is actually incompatible with WooCommerce blocks. So one of the things you want to do first is to disable all your plugins, leaving just WooCommerce and your payment gateway activated, just to be sure another extension is not conflicting with WooCommerce blocks. And then you can also try testing with Storefront and just to see if it works, because most of WooCommerce plugins, most of the extensions are tested with Storefront, and we have several third-party teams out there, which makes it really impossible to test out with all of them. So you can try with Storefront and then see does it work, and that will give you an idea of what is causing the issue.
Yeah, that's of course the Storefront theme. Yep, very good. And it is something that's actively being worked on. So if you haven't already, I'd recommend reaching out to support and let them know what payment method that you're working on and what the specific issue is there, because as it is being actively developed, if there are issues, it'd be great to know about them and we can work on resolving those. That's fantastic. Anna, any more questions? Ruslan wants to know, or says, I'm also developer of a checkout on steroids plugin for Woo. What would be the best way to potentially include in the WooCommerce marketplace and get beta testers? Awesome. So there's a few things here. And I've loved seeing the innovation and like sort of what's happening in the space. People are looking for ways, because it's open source and because it's such a great base, like you can experiment with different ways of getting things done. So I have a few things, a few pieces of advice. The first is to make use of the WooCommerce Facebook group. I would encourage you to explain what you've done and the idea behind it and give folks guidance on how they can test and give feedback. That's a great suggestion. As far as the marketplace goes, there is a process for submitting an extension to the marketplace. And I can tell you that one of the things that they generally like to see is that the extension is already up and running on .org, that you've had some experience with things. But there is we'll see if we can get documentation. There's um, a piece that explains what the process looks like.
Yeah, and one of the key things is making sure that the extension has a good documentation. That's for the end users. So make sure the extension is properly documented if you want it to be featured on WooCommerce.com.
Awesome. And we can take another question. Do we have anything else on it? Luis says in Latin America, the postal code is hardly used as an example. Others want a single field or name. Others want both fields. And that's why I always have to go to the page of other developers. I understand this one of the things that WooCommerce has sort of a default setting out of the box, right? But it's important to make sure that you've adjusted it. Sunday mentioned an example where in his region, apartment isn't really a used thing, right? So we're going to make sure that you customize the checkout process to be as optimized for your audience as possible. All right, awesome. Well, I think that is all the questions that have come in so far. Thank you, everyone, for the questions that you've asked. So next week, we'll be talking about marketing sort of in general. And we'll put out a call for questions for that as well. But this has been fantastic. Sunday or Noel, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to add that optimizing the checkout process is not a one-size-fits-all. So try and find out what works for your audience. And one of the ways you can do that is using A/B testing. So just test to see what really works for your audience. And one of the key things in general that basically helps with optimizing checkout is basically ensuring that you have less fuel. So that's what we say in design, that less is more. So try as much as possible just to keep things simple. So that's what I will add.
Noel, anything from you?
Yeah, I just want to say to everybody how awesome it is to get all the questions in and the poll that we run in the Facebook group to see, what do people want to see next. So, if you have any ideas on a good topic, or if you have any questions, shoot them our way. We love getting them and answering them for you. So thank you.
Yeah, this is very much like why we like to do this. We want this to be shaped around what's useful to you. We want to see you guys succeeding and having success, like with the stores that you're building. We love this work. So if there's anything that you'd like to see us cover in future episodes, we have the rest of the season planned out and based on the feedback that you guys have shared. So look for those announcements and we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Trying to turn it off.